In the video of Dr. Stephanie Nixon, we were asked to count basketball passes, and while we were laser-focused, a person in a gorilla suit strolled through, thumped his chest, and walked off. Most people don't notice the gorilla at all. Hard to believe, right? Dr. Nixon uses this story as a metaphor for privilege. Privilege can be enormous, like a gorilla in the room, but if we're not actively looking for it, we might not see it. Today, we're going to train ourselves to start seeing those invisible gorillas of positionality, power, and privilege in our world, and understand how intersectionality helps bring them into focus. We will gain a shared understanding of these terms, reflect on our own identities and positionality, and learn what it means to practice allyship. These goals will help ensure our work with data reflects the diversity of experiences it aims to serve. Let's start by focusing on positionality. Think of positionality as your personal position in the social hierarchy. Basically, how your unique combination of identities positions you relative to power. Everyone has their own mix. No two of us are exactly alike in identity. Why does this matter? Because when you work with others, especially in community partnerships, your position relative to theirs can create power imbalances. Acknowledging barriers I've been shielded from versus barriers they've faced is the first step to leveling the field. This awareness isn't about feeling guilt. It's about being mindful, building trust, and treating partners as equals from the get-go. The wheel of privilege and power is like a pie chart of identity. Each slice, education, ability, sexual orientation, age, race, and more, shows how privilege shifts depending on context. The closer to the center, the more privilege that identity tends to carry. The wheel helps visualize positionality, our unique profile of power. It sparks conversation about how privilege shapes interactions and highlights why trust gaps or power imbalances may exist in partnerships. For example, an Indigenous woman who works in academia sits near the center for education and employment, but near the periphery for gender and race. By recognizing these differences, we can approach collaboration with greater respect and awareness. Dr. Stephanie Nixon's coin model of privilege and oppression invites us to picture inequality as a coin. The coin itself is the system: racism, sexism, ableism, and so on. Those on top of the coin benefit from unearned advantages, such as being white in a racist society or male in a sexist one. Those on the bottom face disadvantages regardless of effort, simply because they don't fit the socially advantaged identity. The key insight is that privilege and oppression are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. We often notice the bottom because that's where harm is most visible. But people on top frequently don't recognize the coin at all. For example, we talk about marginalized groups, but rarely about advantaged groups who benefit. The coin model reminds us, to address inequity, we must see and act on the entire coin: the privilege, the oppression, and the system that sustains both. Why does it matter to see the whole coin? Because it changes how we frame problems, and therefore solutions. Stephanie Nixon notes that if we only focus on the bottom of the coin, we frame issues as deficits in marginalized people themselves. For example, if one neighborhood shows poorer health outcomes, a narrow view might say, let's give them nutrition workshops. While well-intentioned, this misses deeper causes like poverty, systemic racism, or lack of access to healthy food options. In other words, the coin itself. By ignoring the top of the coin, where others benefit from better access and fewer barriers, we end up with one-sided fixes. Reframing the issue as systemic, asking how the coin privileges some while disadvantaging others, opens space for real solutions: policy reform, resource redistribution, and dismantling discrimination. In short, don't ask what's wrong with the people, ask what's wrong with the conditions. That shift moves from blaming individuals to transforming systems. Now let's add another layer: intersectionality. Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw introduced this concept to explain something simple yet often overlooked. People can be impacted by more than one type of injustice at the same time. Intersectionality is about those missing frames. Dr. Crenshaw actually coined the term intersectionality after studying a case of a Black woman, Emma de Graffenried, who wasn't hired at a company. She sued for discrimination, and the court absurdly said, well, we hire Black people and we hire women. Case dismissed. The catch was, all the Black people hired were men in the factory, and all the women hired were white in the office. Emma was facing a double bind that the law couldn't see because it only saw single categories. Intersectionality gives us language to address those double binds. It tells us that we need to think in terms of overlapping identities and systems of power. Otherwise, as Dr. Crenshaw says, people like Emma will keep falling through the cracks of our movement. Intersectionality isn't just about extreme cases. It's about all of us. Each person holds multiple identities, meaning you may be on top of some coins, privilege, and the bottom of others, oppression. For example, a wealthy immigrant is privileged by class, but disadvantaged by citizenship status. Both realities coexist. Context shapes how these play out. In a small conservative town, sexuality may dominate. In other spaces, wealth may protect them. Crucially, these dynamics don't cancel each other out. It's not +1 privilege and -1 oppression equals 0. People experience both, sometimes more visibly one than the other. This can feel like a tension or roller coaster, but it's normal. Intersectionality helps us make sense of it and reminds researchers and policymakers not to reduce people to a single label, but to consider the full mosaic of identity in changing contexts. All this talk of coins and systems comes down to real lives. A key principle, those who experience oppression know it best. Privilege often brings what Dr. Nixon calls an irrational sense of expertise, the belief we understand struggles we've never lived. Dr. Camara Jones described this as a dual reality of the open-closed sign. People inside may not notice it, while those outside never forget. The antidote is listening. One participant shared that they hadn't recognized their privilege as a hearing person until spending time with the deaf community. Everyday things like easily talking to a doctor suddenly stood out as profound advantages. That realization only came from lived experience. When we create space for community partners to share their stories, two things happen. We truly learn, and we build trust. It shows respect for them as experts in their own lives. Data matters, but lived stories often reveal what numbers alone cannot. So how do we put this into practice as data scientists or policymakers? A key step is being upfront about positionality and power when working with communities. It may feel awkward to say, I know I hold privilege, but it signals humility and awareness, which are essential for trust. And trust is the currency of collaboration. Communities decide what data to share based on whether they trust how it will be used. To build that trust, aim for shared ownership. Don't arrive with a preset project. Instead, co-create. Ask what questions matter to partners. Involve them as co-researchers and agree on how data will be used. This flips the frame from we're here to study you to we're here to work with you. Ultimately, the goal is to change the coin or systems, not to blame those on the bottom. When partners see you value their input, dialogue is more honest, the data is richer, and the impact is stronger. In closing, let's talk about allyship. It isn't a title, it's a practice. Being an ally means ongoing work, learning, confronting bias, and standing beside partners in the fight for equity. A key part is letting go of the savior complex. Those of us with privilege may feel compelled to fix people on the bottom of the coin. But as Dr. Stephanie Nixon reminds us, that only reinforces imbalance. The people most affected by oppression hold crucial expertise about the system itself. Our role is to listen, amplify their solutions, and use our resources to challenge the structures they identify. Indigenous activist Lila Watson put it best. If you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. That's the spirit. Humility, solidarity, and shared destiny, working as true partners side by side.